Hello everyone and welcome to Ask Jama webinar, Ask Us Anything. My name is Marie and I will be the host for today's webinar.
We're getting a lot of good questions live and I'm trying to chat with folks as we go through here. So I appreciate y'all bringing the questions. I'm gonna share my screen and let me make sure I do this correctly. We had a lot of good questions. One of the first ones that I want to start with was generally about requirements authoring. And some of the questions that you submitted when you were registering, some folks asked, like, what are some ways to improve my team's quality of requirements authoring? And then Mingan, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, you had a really good question around how to distinguish system level and subsystem level requirements. So I thought I'd tackle those two kind of in the same Q&A section. For those that aren't familiar with Jama Connect, on the right-hand side, you'll see a little relationship diagram, and these boxes are item types. They're different than documents. They're really more like data-driven, granular, specific requirements. So you could have multiple levels of requirements that trace to each other. So that's essentially how I would differentiate. If you have a system requirement, you need to decompose that into multiple subsystem requirements. You could utilize this traceability capability. So for example, if I'm looking at this manual scheduling system requirement, there's probably a lot of manual scheduling I could do. I could change the temperature. I could change like the schedule of when I'm home or when I'm not home. So I could make that be subsystem requirements that are part of the software. And it's really just when you have your relationship rule set up, you can add subsystem requirements that would then be traced to the system requirement. So I think using the multiple item types and the relationship rule is a great way to differentiate. But kind of getting back to also like the quality, how do I know a requirement is written of a high quality? There's a lot of different ways that you can tackle that. I have this little text item here called guidance, and I find that a lot of our customers do a really good job of putting directly in Jama Connect like a link to their work instructions, which has maybe it's like a process guide, or maybe it's an actual tactical screenshot by screenshot set of instructions that in terms of how you want people to use Jama Connect. And it's also a great place to put in some requirements authoring suggestions. So for example, I have here a couple different requirement templates. I have one that's based on system engineering. So you want to have like a trigger, precondition, actor, action, object. That's a very good template to start from. And then I've got a little example here, like an airbag. When a collision is detected, precondition is and the passenger airbag switches on. The actor is the system. Action is it shall detonate, and the object is the passenger airbag. Now, you don't necessarily have to write it in a table format, but having this little template here and the example can be really nice when you're authoring. And you can actually work with your Jama admins to add these templates directly in Jama. So for example, if I click to add a new system requirement, you can see here, I can have this auto-populate into the description field. And the example is nice for me to see, but I could just easily delete that example and then go in to start authoring the actual requirement. So those are some things to help with the structuring of requirements, but there's also really good training and resources out there. Like InCozy has some great leaflets or requirements rules. So they have at a high level, you know, a requirement needs to be necessary, needs to be clearly written, it needs to be achievable. So there's really good guidelines. And we at Jama Connect, we offer requirements management 101 classes. So agnostic of Jama Connect, the tool, if you want to, you know, work with us on actually giving some requirements management training in some of these different resources or syntaxes, we're definitely happy to help you with that. And then I think the last thing I forget who it was, but someone had the question about requirements versus design. The way that I like to differentiate it is requirements are really meant to describe the need for something, whereas design is like the response of the how we're actually going to implement that requirement. And so this is a very simple differentiation between the two. But obviously, if you have a complex system, you know, you might have something more complicated where, like in my example, I have stakeholder needs that decompose down to system requirements that decompose into subsystem hardware, software requirements. But it is important that you're differentiating requirements versus design, because you don't want to over constrain, your development team by putting too much design decisions into the requirements themselves. Of course, that's always a real challenge, and I'm guilty of doing that myself too. So hopefully, Mingen, that answered your question around differentiating system and subsystem requirements. Again, I would tackle it through having multiple item types and having those traced to each other. But feel free to ask a follow-up question if that didn't quite answer what you're getting at. Maybe Godiva, I'll turn it over to you at this point to see if you have any questions you want to tackle in a moment.